So today I'm going to cover kind of a controversial topic, and that's if the high performance power plan is worth turning on, or should you just stay on the balance plan? I'm going to try to answer that question today. Stay tuned. So every time I recommend using the high performance power plan, I inevitably get someone in the comments claiming I'm wrong. Sometimes they make reasonable arguments for why they think I'm wrong, but most of the time, they imply that because I disagree with them, I have no idea what I'm talking about on anything else. Okay, I admit, I haven't tested it for quite some time, so that's what we're gonna do today. But first, I gotta pay some bills, so check out today's sponsor. Is your copy of Windows 10 unactivated? Well, it doesn't have to be, because with today's sponsor, VIP SCD Key, you can get a valid Windows 10 license for under $20. Stop dealing with that stupid watermark on the desktop, the valid license for Windows 10. Also, with an activated copy of Windows 10, you can upgrade to Windows 11 for free. Just go to the link in the description below and pick up a valid Windows 10 license key. During checkout, use the code CYBERCPU for a 25% discount. Once you have your key, go to your activation settings in Windows 10 and click on the link that says Change Product Key. Enter the product key you just purchased and hit Activate. Now you don't have to deal with that stupid watermark that come with running an unactivated copy of Windows 10. Now, on with the video. Okay, let's clear up some disinformation first. Many people claim that by turning on the high performance power plan, it turns off all throttling in your CPU and other hardware, and it makes your computer run at its maximum amount of power all the time. That's simply not true. Yes, the high performance power plan does more aggressively ramp up your CPU clock speeds, but it still allows your CPU to throttle down when it's at idle. It doesn't just run it at its max speed all the time. In fact, the cores fall asleep at the same rate under the high performance plan as it does under the balance plan. In fact, when it comes to your CPU's power settings, the difference between the balance plan and the high performance plan breaks down to 5 different settings. The first one is the processor performance boost policy. This policy determines how much your processor is allowed to boost over its maximum clock speed. So my Ryzen 5 in this system here has a clock speed of 3.5 gigahertz, but it will boost over 4 gigahertz all day long. In fact, the Ryzen 5 5600 boost clock is 4.4 gigahertz. The performance boost policy for the balance plan will allow your processor to boost up to 60% of its normal clock speed, while the high performance plan will allow it to boost to 100% of its boost clock. This means that under the high performance plan, my processor is allowed to boost to its maximum of 4.4 gigahertz when needed. Under the balance plan though, the maximum boost will be around 4 gigahertz, and it will never reach its maximum of 4.4 gigahertz. However, this also depends on other factors as well. The processor will also never reach its maximum boost if the temperature is too high or if there's not enough power available to maintain that boost clock. The next setting that's different between the high performance and balance plan is the minimum processor state. This is the one that I think people confuse into thinking that the high performance mode makes your processor run at its max clock speed all the time. The reason I think people confuse this setting is because a lot of websites say that's what it does. Unfortunately, that's not what it does. In fact, the minimum processor state has nothing to do with the processor's clock speed at all. It's a power management setting. This is also the only policy between the balanced and high performance plan that can be set in the advanced menu. The other policies that I'm talking about are hidden kind of behind the window in the advanced menu. But stay tuned and I'll show you how you can get to all of these settings if you want. Now you're able to change the minimum processor state as well as the maximum processor state in the advanced settings of your power settings in Windows. The balanced processor plan sets the minimum processor state to 0, while the high performance plan sets the minimum processor state to 100%. What this indicates is the amount of power that's available to the CPU at idle state. Now, the default of 0 in the balance plan doesn't mean that it's 0 power available to the CPU. By setting this to 0, you're simply disabling the policy. So on the balance plan, the processor is the one that gets to decide how much power it has available to it, when on the high performance plan, you're telling the CPU that it can use all the power it wants.
1.21 gigawatts! 1.21 gigawatts! My God! What the hell is a gigawatt?
Now, this setting only affects the amount of power available to the CPU when it's at idle or doing very low workloads. Once the workload increases, the maximum power state kicks in, and that should be 100% no matter what. This setting can affect your system's power usage, and it can also affect your system's cooling. Just as a side note though, just because you're providing the processor with 100% of the power available to it doesn't mean that it's actually going to use all that power. It simply means that it's available. The next setting that differs between the balanced power plan and the high performance power plan is the processor performance core parking overutilization threshold. That one's a mouthful. Luckily, it's a much simpler concept than it sounds. Here, let me explain it like this. On the Autobahn in Europe, they actually have lanes that can be opened and closed digitally from a control center. It's actually a really neat way to control congestion in traffic, which is pretty important on a freeway that has no speed limit. When the congestion starts to get bad, then they can convert the shoulders into lanes on the highway. Essentially, this turns a 3-lane highway into a 5-lane highway. This is similar to what processor performance core parking underutilization threshold is. If you have a 6-core processor and 5 cores are parked and 1 core is active, then the percentage of utilization that is required before that core is considered overutilized and another core is unparked. On the balance plan, that's 85% utilization, while on the performance plan, it's 60% utilization. This essentially means on the performance plan, it will unpark cores faster than on the balance plan. The next setting that differs between the balance plan and the high performance plan is the processor performance core parking decrease time. This is the amount of performance check intervals that take place before a core can be parked. On the balanced power plan, this is set to 10 intervals, and on the high performance plan, this is set to 20 intervals. Essentially, on the high performance plan, it allows cores to stay unparked for longer than on the balanced plan. Now, if you've been keeping count, we're on the 5th one now, and this is the last difference between the balanced power plan and the high performance power plan, is the processor performance core parking increase time. If you probably guessed, that's exactly the opposite of the setting we just talked about. This is the amount of performance check intervals that elapse before a core is allowed to unpark. For the balanced power plan, that's 3 intervals. And for the high performance power plan, that's 7 intervals. Okay, so those have just been the processor settings that are different between the performance plan and the balance plan. There is more to talk about though. That's the existence of the Ryzen balance plan and the built-in Windows plan. Many people claim that you can't use the Windows power plans on Ryzen processors. This was actually true, but it's not true anymore. There was a software problem the built-in power plans had back during the first through, I think, the 3rd generation of Ryzen CPUs. This issue had to do with core parking. There's a pretty significant performance penalty to parking and unparking cores. Now, this is not to be confused with sleeping and waking cores. Essentially, the built-in Windows power plans would by default disable core parking on Intel processors, but not AMD processors. So this gave Intel processors an apparent performance advantage that AMD didn't get to utilize. It essentially made Intel processors look faster than AMD processors, when in reality, it was the core parking policy that caused it. However, this isn't the case anymore. Both Intel and AMD processors by default have core parking disabled on the balanced and high performance plans. So it's no longer necessary to use the Ryzen power plan on AMD CPUs. In fact, I don't even think the AMD chipset drivers install them anymore. I might be wrong, but I don't believe they do. And you know what? This also makes all the core parking settings that we talked about earlier pretty much irrelevant, because if core parking is disabled, then it doesn't matter what those settings are set to. Now, up until this point, we've only talked about how these power plans affect the processor itself. I spent most of my time on the processor because that's typically why people tell you not to use the high performance power plan. But there are other systems within your computer that are affected based on your power plan. So let's take a second to go over those real quick. The first one is pretty obvious, and that's your hard drive. Whether you use a spinning disk or an SSD, your storage device has the ability to sleep or at least go into some kind of power saving mode. In the high performance power plan, this power saving mode is disabled. So your storage device are available whenever you need them. However, that also means they're using power when you're not using them. So keep that in mind. The next system that is affected is your PCI Express bus link state power management. By default, the balance plan sets this to moderate power savings, and in the high performance power plan, it's disabled completely. Essentially, all this means is that the high performance plan doesn't use any power management at all for your PCI Express bus. And in the balance plan, it goes into kind of a power saving mode if the PCI Express is in idle. Now, if you'd like to dig deeper into your power plan settings, then I recommend you check out the program called Power Settings Explorer. That's what I use to compare the different power profiles for this video. I'll go ahead and leave a link to it in the description below. That program will allow you to see all of the hidden advanced settings and how they relate to each power profile. It will also let you modify them, and they're kind of hidden for a reason. So be very careful with what you change with that program because it can really mess your system up.
No. Not this time. Come on.
But ultimately, now you know what the difference between the balanced and high performance plans are. What does it actually mean for your system's performance? For that, I did a lot of testing, and I'm going to briefly cover that right now. We'll go through it fast because I think this video is going to end up being pretty long if I don't. Now, I did test the power saver profile, but I'm not going to cover it in these test results. All I'm going to say is don't use the power saver profile. Seriously, don't use it. Now, let's get into the benchmarks. Now, I always forget to mention the system specs on my computer here because I assume you guys have watched all my videos and seen this computer get built from the ground up. But I understand that some of you might not have seen my past catalog. So, the system we're running these benchmarks on is a Ryzen 5 5600. I have 32 gigs of PC 3200 and a GeForce RTX 3060. Both the CPU and GPU are water cooled. The system currently is running Windows 11 Home because that just happened to be what was on it when I filmed this video. The Windows install is completely default with no tweaks, debloating, or anything. The NVIDIA driver version is 551.61, which was the latest NVIDIA driver at the filming of this video. Now, the first game we're looking at is Black Mesa. This is an older game, but fits the genre that people who like to play older games. With the balanced power profile, we got an average FPS of 169.6 and a 1% low of 109.8. We also got a 0.1% low of 48 even. When switching to the high performance power plan, we got an average FPS of 172.2 and a 1% low of 110.2. We also got a 0.1% low of 67.8. Now, this gave us only a kind of a modest 1.7% increase in our average frame rate and only a 0.4% increase in our 1% low. However, we got a 34.2% increase in our 0.1% low. Those frame timings actually look pretty good. The next game we're looking at is Counter-Strike 2. This is probably the most popular FPS, so it belongs on this list. With the balanced power profile, we got an average frame rate of 155.2 and a 1% low of 91.8. We got a 0.1% low of 32.9. When switching to the high performance power plan, we got an average FPS of 153.9, which is actually a 0.8% drop in frame rate, but well within the margin of error. However, we did get a 1% low of 95.5, which is a 4% increase, and a 0.1% low of 65.7, which is a 66.5% better than the balanced power profile. Looks like a pattern might be forming here, doesn't it? The next game we're looking at is Cyberpunk 2077. Now, for some reason, I just could not get this game to run right, and it might have something to do with the latest update on the game. I don't know, but just keep that in mind. But with that said, with the balanced power profile, I got an average FPS of 51.6 and a 1% low of 45.7. We also got a 0.1% low of 43.7. Now, once switching to the high performance profile, I got an average FPS of 51.3, which is a 0.8% drop from the balanced profile. I also got a 45.5 1% low. That was a 0.4% drop from the balance profile. So both of these are well within the margin of error though. But now for the 0.1% low, I got 44.2 FPS, which is a 1.1% improvement. But like I said, I couldn't get this game to run quite right, and I think it had something to do with the latest update. It might also have to do with the install of Windows 11 that I currently have isn't remotely optimized for gaming at the moment. The next game we're looking at is GTA 5. Some people ask why I still keep this game in my benchmark results, and it's because it's still one of the most popular games on Steam. And if you don't like it, then make your own videos, and you can leave it out of yours. With the balanced power profile, I got an average FPS of 121.4 and a 1% low of 86.8. I also got a 0.1% low of 65.7. Now, when switching to the high performance power profile, I got an average FPS of 122.3 and a 1% low of 89.7. This is only a 0.7% increase in average frame rate, but a 3.3% increase in our 1% low. Now, the 0.1% low came out to 77.3, which gave us a 16.2% increase. Seems like high performance power plan definitely gives you a boost in your frame timings. The next game we're looking at is Red Dead Redemption 2. With the balanced power profile, I got an average FPS of 65.8 and a 1% low of 45.5. We also got a 0.1% low of 32.1. Once switching to the high performance profile, we got an average FPS of 68.1 and a 1% low of 52.2. This has so far been the best increase in average frame rate that we've seen yet at 3.4%. But it's also the best 1% low we've seen as well at 13.7%. What's even better is when we get to the 0.1% low at 38.3, giving us a 17.6% increase. Not too shabby for just changing a power profile. Now, I also wanted to go through some productivity benchmarks. So for that, I simply ran PCMark. At least it gave us a general idea of non-gaming system performance. In PCMark, with the balanced profile, I got a score of 68.55. When switching to the high performance profile, I got a score of 69.97. That gave us a 2.1% increase in our overall score. Now, the essential and the content creation were pretty close to each other, but the productivity score showed the biggest spread between the different categories. With the balance plan, we got a productivity score of 9,044. But with the high performance plan, we got a productivity score of 9,548. That's a 5.4% increase in our productivity score. I also did all of this testing on my Potato PC that I typically use for upgrading Windows 11 on unsupported hardware videos. But those were pretty much the same results. I didn't bother putting those results in here because it pretty much would have just been repeating myself with lower overall numbers. Now, I was pretty surprised with these results. Ultimately, you don't see a huge boost in performance using the high performance power plan, which actually kind of surprised me. But you do see a considerable boost in your 1% and your 0.1% lows, which is your frame timings. That affects your latency and things of that nature. Now, there are a few different arguments for why you should use the balance plan over the high performance plan. Those people who advocate for that say that the power plan just wastes too much power and doesn't give you enough benefit. And they're partly right. It really doesn't give you much benefit, and it potentially could use a lot more power. However, the people who advocate for using the high performance plan say that it helps with micro stutter as well as lowers your latency. Based on the test results that I got, I would say that they're right too. Now, there is a trade-off. By using the high performance power plan, you're going to use more power whenever your computer is turned on. But it does give you a benefit in gaming, a pretty considerable benefit if you think about it. And honestly, a lot of these same people that complain about power also say you should run a 3090, which uses 400 watts. So, I don't know. Take that for what it is. Also, though, on the subject of productivity, we saw a pretty considerable boost in performance in PCMark by using the high performance power plan. We only saw a 2.1% increase in our overall score, but once you break down that score into its different categories, we saw a 5.4% increase in performance in productivity apps, specifically like Word and Excel, things of that nature. So the high performance power plan does make your games play a little bit better, and it makes everything work a little bit better. Now, we can't talk about power profiles without briefly touching on the ultimate performance profile. I know, if this subject wasn't controversial enough, right? I tested this as well, but I didn't include it in the test results above, and that's because I think it's a gimmick. It gave literally no benefit over the high performance plan. And when I went through every individual power policy setting, I couldn't find a single difference between it and the high performance plan. I mean, there may be a difference, and if you know of one, make sure you mention it in the comments below. However, there weren't enough benefits to turn it on for me to even include it in the test results. Ultimately, though, I think my recommendation is going to remain using the high performance power profile. When people complain about it, I'll just share this video with them. However, I think there might be one change that I may make to my recommendation to kind of get the best of both worlds. And I think that change is going to be the minimum processor state in the advanced power management settings. If you change this from 100% to 0, you'll essentially disable this feature and allow your processor to do its own power management. That might save you a little bit of power that you wouldn't otherwise be wasting in the high performance power plan. At least while your system's at idle. Personally, though, I'm not too concerned with power usage because I have solar, so my power is essentially free. Yes, I do have to pay for solar panels, but I don't pay any more as long as they're using less power than they produce, which I'm always using less power than my panels produce. Now, if you'd like to see how I should have set this system here up prior to doing this video, then check out this video where I show you how to set up Windows 11 for gaming. In fact, that's the video where someone called me stupid in the comments for recommending the high performance power plan. You know what? I stand by my recommendation, and thanks for the video idea. As always, you guys have a great day.